everyone, and welcome to day 40 and 41 of our RV-10 build. We are continuing work on the Tailcone. A couple things before we get started. One, I don't know how the audio is going to turn out. My normal microphone isn't working, so I'm using a different one. So if it sounds a little bit different, I apologize. Two, as I mentioned previously, I am going to continue mentioning Service Bulletin 18-03-30 about the elevator control stop and all of these Tailcone videos to make sure nobody misses it. It is not being addressed in this current video with the day's work that we're covering, but you can find the information about it on the van's website. Let's get started. So we are working on match drilling the J-channels to the skins and lining up the center line that we drew on all of them through the holes in the skin, and you go and adjust them as necessary to make sure that they stay centered while you're drilling. And so to start the first hole, you drew on all of the stiffeners a vertical line through the center line that you drew, and that vertical line is about, I think it was 3/16 of an inch in from the edges. And so you line up one of those little cross hatches through the one closest, the hole closest to the forward side of the tail cone. And what we did to get those to stay in place, because as I mentioned, it's not a really snug fit. They sit very loosely in the little notches in the frames and the bulkheads. We just used little clecoed clamps to help hold it in place, and then carefully put my hand there to help hold it flush while doing the drilling and to help it hold still. Just be careful not to accidentally drill your hand. So again, just exercise caution. And then after you get the first one in, you can get the first cleco, and it starts to get a lot easier from there. As you've probably noticed by now, I am not here. I actually don't remember where it was that I had to go that day, but Tyler got some time to work on the plane by himself, so it's a different perspective you're going to get for a little while here, seeing him get to work solo on the plane. As I mentioned, it says that you're supposed to make sure to keep the center line there visible through the holes as you are match drilling, so you kind of go and adjust it as necessary, tweaking it back and forth, because again, it's not sitting in a very snug notch there in those frames and bulkheads. And it's pretty easy here on the bottom skin. As you can see, Tyler's able to easily just kind of reach underneath and tweak it as necessary. You're also holding it flush against the skin while you're drilling, because again, since it's not sitting super snug, trying to just kind of help support it and hold it up nice and flush against the inside there of the bottom skin and the side skins as well, just to get a nice clean hold that's going to bind them together properly, like they're going to sit when you have it riveted. I did get a really neat suggestion from another build friend, Zach. Zach, thank you for this. We were not aware of this suggestion, so I have no experience with it because we didn't try it, but what he recommended that I thought was really cool is to use some really strong magnets to help you when you're doing this match drilling here on the stiffeners. So the idea would be you get some very strong ones, and you would put you'd have pairs of them. So you'd put one on the inside of the skin along the J channel that you're match drilling, and then you'd put one on the outside of the skin to help pinch it together. And he said if you put them about every 5 holes, it worked out apparently for him pretty well to hold the stiffeners in place there while match drilling. But he said it is important, obviously, to make sure you have very strong magnets that can actually hold it nice and tight and keep it from moving. But anyway, it seemed like a good idea to share, because from hearing him talk about it, it sounded like a really clever idea. So I just wanted to put that out there for any of y'all who haven't done this so far. As you may have already noticed, and as you will see in the future, in the rest of the video and the rest of the time that we spend working on the Tailcone, there is, as I mentioned, a substantial amount of time that you're kind of sitting and kneeling on the ground trying to work around the Tailcone there. And so this is where realizing having those little padded floor tiles came in really handy. It just made it really nice and comfortable to have those there on the floor to work with. As you can see here, apparently that bottom skin was moving a little bit for Tyler while he was working on it. So as a quick little fix, he just used some twine to wrap around that skin and to wrap it around the sawhorse to just kind of hold it in place. I thought that was kind of clever. So after getting all of those stiffeners match drilled into the bottom skin, you're now going to start working on one of the side skins. You start on the right side, and so you're going to get the J channels into the little notches there on the side, and then you're going to add the right side skin and start clecoing that down. And one thing here that we started to notice is that even though the skin is curved, it's not like exactly curved super snug up to the flanges, either that or the flanges on those little frames or bulkheads. The point is they didn't all necessarily line up perfectly, the flanges on the curves of the frames and the bulkheads to the curves on the inside of those skins. And it was hard trying to reach with the cleco from the outside and trying to sometimes get it to catch the little flange on the inside and go through that hole to pull it together. And so something that we found while working on this was that actually a couple times it was easier if we went in from the inside instead of from the outside and put the cleco through the hole in the little flange there on the curve and then pushed it through to pull it snug to the side skins. It just seemed for some reason to be easier trying to get it to match up that way and pull them together tight that way. And once you got about like 2 of them there from the inside through the curve, you could then pop through on the outside and get the clecos from the outside in once you had a couple that are just already holding it tight. Not a huge deal, but again, it made it a little tricky just trying to kind of line them up there on the curves and get everything pulled together. So now working here, once you've got the side skin, one thing we did think about doing was knowing how easy it had been for Tyler with the bottom skin up on the sawhorses there and how easy it was for him to manipulate the J channels while he was drilling. We tried to see if we could rotate the tail cone onto its side and have the right side skin facing up instead of the bottom skin. But I think perhaps with the weight of all the clecos that were holding the stiffeners that we just match drilled onto the bottom skin, it just didn't feel very sturdy or stable, so we ended up just flipping it back the way it was and having it with the bottom skin facing up and having the right skin there on the side hanging down. And what we did then is we'd had the sawhorses raised enough that we were able to sit underneath it, and so Tyler sat on the outside with the drill, and then I would sit on the inside and maneuver the J channels and hold them flush. So basically Tyler would tell me if they needed to go up or down, and I'd wiggle it a little bit until he told me that it looked just right for him, and then I would sit there and hold it flush against the inside of those side skins while he did the match drilling, and he'd go and do a couple holes at a time and get it clecoed, and then we'd readjust as necessary. And after doing all the bottom stiffeners, it didn't take very long after we'd started working on the ones there on the side to realize that we were quickly running out of clecos. We were putting one in every hole as we were match drilling, again trying to make sure to hold everything nice and tight and flush and keep it all aligned properly. And there's a lot of holes in all these stiffeners, so there's definitely not enough to go and put a cleco in every single hole in all of the stiffeners. There was nowhere close enough for us to do that. And so what we ended up having to do is basically go back and, for lack of a better word, like harvest clecos from the stiffeners that we had already match drilled and pull out the ones that we no longer needed there, holding it in every single hole, so that then we had enough clecos to put one in every single hole of the stiffeners as we were match drilling them. And in case you're wondering, we purchased 500 of these 3/32 silver clecos from Cleveland Tool when we bought our kit, just to give you an idea of what we were working with. Now, there really is nowhere else in the empennage kit where I think you're going to have this problem. We had plenty of clecos for the horizontal stabilizer, which would be the next biggest piece really that you're working with. I think it still came kind of close. I think we ended up being down to maybe 20 or 30 clecos or so by the end, but it wasn't a problem. It wasn't like it was very sparse or we had an issue trying to get all the parts clecoed together. But if you're planning to perhaps slow build your wings, you might consider buying more than the 500. I think we ended up actually buying another 200 or 300 of the silver 3/32 inch clecoes. But to be fair, also, when we were building the wings, we were not always working on the same piece at the same time. So for example, I had both wing spars out and had clecos going through all the holes, match drilling those J channels to the center spar, or sorry, to the wing spar flanges, and Tyler was working on the fuel tanks. So we had 3 to 4 different parts of the wings that we were working on at the same point in time. So it's something to consider, and I unfortunately can't speak to how many you'll need for the fuselage since we're still in the very early stages of it. I do think I'm happy though that we went ahead and bought the extras, again having gone through the slow build on the wings and now going and doing the fuselage ourselves. So if that's something that you're going to do, if you're not going to do the quick build, you might just consider it, because again, even on those top skins, getting those onto the wings, we still use the vast majority of the clecos that we had to make that work and to get enough clecos in there as we were putting the skins onto the wing structure there to try and make sure everything's sitting nice and smooth and not have any ripples in it. So just something to keep in mind. But you're not gonna have enough if you just get the standard amount that comes with the kit, or even with the 500, you're not gonna have enough to go in every single hole and just leave it there. So you'll just have to go back and pull some of the clecos from the ones you already drilled to then use on the ones you're now drilling. We continue to go ahead and put one in each hole while we were drilling, and just would go back and pull a couple out. Like every time we'd finish a different stiffener or a different section of it or a huge chunk of it, we'd go back and pull out the clecos that no longer needed to be there. And I think by the time we finished everything with the tail cone, we had maybe one cleco in about every 4th hole or so. It might have been even more sparse than that. Because as you can see, I mean, it is a lot, and especially then once you add those top skins on top later, there's a lot you're holding together there. So once you flip it over, after you finish doing everything there on the right skin, you are now going to be attaching the bulkheads there at the rear of the tail cone, but prior to attaching the left side skin. And just like what I'd mentioned before with the curves there in the frames and the bulkheads at the front, this was, again, another place you've got a small bottom skin that you are attaching, the aft bottom skin, and then you've got the different bulkheads that you're attaching as well. And so same thing with that curvature, and now it got even more tricky because on one part you are putting clecos through the F1011 bulkhead flanges, then you're putting it through the F1079 aft bottom skin, and then you're putting it through the forward bottom skin. So you're having to get it through 3 curved pieces, and again, they weren't all necessarily exactly the same curvature. So this was one place again where it really came in handy, I think, to try to cleco it from the inside out instead of the outside in. Maybe that's just me, but you know, hopefully it helps you guys out. We put 1 or 2 in there from the inside, and then it just kind of pulled everything together and got it lined up much easier to then allow us to put all the rest of the clecos in from the outside to hold those parts in place as we were attaching them, and then going and attaching the left side skin. And of course, we had a lot of fun taking photos once we got the left side skin there attached. We hadn't done the stiffeners here at this point, but getting it put together and you start to really get a vision for the shape, you know, everything coming together. It was just really fun to see this huge piece now put together in the garage. But trying to get that skin attached now, the left side skin, once we had it flipped up, you can see it led to some not so very flattering camera angles, so I'm just going to kind of blur some of this out. I'll be honest, I was just thinking about putting together the skins and not thinking about exactly what the camera was aimed at. But one suggestion, in case you are looking to avoid any such unflattering angles, would be to lower the sawhorses. We'd had the sawhorses raised fairly high because originally when it was upside down and I was working on the inside there holding the stiffeners in place while Tyler was match drilling them, we needed enough clearance for me to be able to sit down and be sitting up and not have, you know, the bottom skin knocking my head. So we'd had the sawhorses elevated. By going and then dropping them all the way down, which we end up doing later before we start doing all of the match drilling on the stiffeners on that left side skin, I was able to easily reach in and adjust the stiffeners just by sticking my hand over the edge once it was lower. So once you flip it upside down, if you have that ability, you might consider adjusting the height of your sawhorses before you move on. And so the next day was our anniversary, day 41, and we were back at it out there working together in the garage on that left skin and the stiffeners. And we once again started by having to harvest more clecoes to use from the previous day's work in order to do the match drilling there on those left stiffeners. And ended up even pulling more from the bottom skin than we'd already pulled the previous day. So this is where, again, it started to get pretty sparse. Because we really ended up having to harvest that many different clecoes in order to go and hold everything together during the match drilling with one cleco in each hole. And I'm skipping over a lot of this actually because it was pretty repetitive. Again, you have 3 of these stiffeners that go, let's see, there was, I think, 3 along the bottom and then 3 along each side skin. And obviously the left and the right were pretty similar. And once you've kind of seen us going from front to back on one of them, you've seen exactly what's going to happen for the next 2. So I did cut a bit of that out just to avoid some of the monotony. I don't think you necessarily need to see the same thing 3 times, but I'm going to cut short day 41 here. We did do more, but this has already gotten to be a substantially long video, and so I'll get into the rest of what we did on day 41 in the next video, but at least this hopefully gets you through what we did for getting all those the J channels and the side stiffeners there attached to the tail cone. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to give me a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so for more videos like these and to follow along as we build our RV-10.